So today we're going to be looking at the guard of Levi Jones-Leary, and we're going to be looking at how he manages to create connections from seated and supine situations. So not looking at the specific attacks he does from certain guards, but rather how he manages getting to a connection in the first place. So this is the first clip that we'll look at, and we'll see how Levi engages from a seated guard. So he takes this mercy grip with his right hand, and now he's going to use his right heel on the mat and take a grip behind the tricep with his left hand, and he's going to use this to pull himself into a guard. So by throwing his back to the mat, it means that the weight is now taken off of his feet, and because of that it frees up his legs to shoot into an offensive position. So watch his right foot here, for example. So here we'll see a similar thing, but instead of Levi having a grip, his opponent has a double ankle control. But Levi still throws his back to the mat, and it acts as almost a trapdoor effect where the person falls into him, and Levi can use this momentum to set up his next attack. Okay, so next example, his opponent is moving away, he really doesn't want to engage, and we see his opponent lift the feet once, and now let's look what happens when the opponent lifts the feet again. Levi's going to take double tricep control, and he uses this again to pull himself into the legs and immediately goes in the offensive. So really the central theme here is that Levi has to find a way of making a decent connection, whether that be a mercy grip, the double tricep control, or here just grabbing the leg, and then he's going to use that connection to throw his back to the mat, swing himself underneath, and move right into an offensive move. And the majority of the clips that we've seen, the person is going to be leading with the hands and trying to grip fight, so Levi has to find a way through that. But if the person removes their hands and leads with their legs, well, this is just not a good idea, because it just gives Levi instant access and he can move into his attack straight away. And something to consider for Levi's seated posture here is that if he overreaches with his arms, he's going to open up this space between his elbow and his knee, and that can set up knee cuts and cause other problems. So watch how Levi keeps his elbow and his knees close together and moves forwards by dragging himself forwards with his heels, so then he never has to overreach. But one of the problems with seated guard is that it's hard to absorb pressure because your feet are on the ground and your hands are concerned with gripping, so you don't have the availability of frames. So when people are aggressive and good at engaging, Levi often has to look for a connection off his back now. So for example here, Joseph is pressuring into Levi, and Levi looks for the 2-on-1 on this arm. So initially Joseph does a good job of clearing the 2-on-1, but we're going to see Levi get the 2-on-1 again, and now when Joseph looks to clear it by posturing, now Levi's going to connect to the legs. The 2-on-1 is something that Levi looks for a lot, and if people don't posture up and instead stay at a closer range, then Levi can look for a Choi bar setup instead. But I think what's most important to understand is how Levi's able to keep a defensive posture, which allows the opportunity for connections. So we'll look at this clip with Joseph and Levi, and we'll look at the small things that Levi's doing. So Joseph starts out controlling both of Levi's feet. So if Levi was to go for a 2-on-1 here, there's nothing stopping Joseph from just getting chest to chest. So instead he's going to extend both of his frames and push on that near shoulder, and he's going to use the frames to bring that bottom foot back inside. And Joseph straight away clears that foot and tries to get past it again, but Levi keeps bringing it in front. Now that the foot is in front, that acts as a frame, so Levi can choose to grip instead with his arms. And now after Levi gets the 2-on-1 on the left side, Joseph switches sides now. So now Levi has a lasso, which isn't that effective of a grip in no-gi, but it's still keeping the foot in front, which means that Joseph is going to continue switching sides and trying to find a way through. And then we see Joseph come back to the feet again, but now watch as he relieves pressure off the feet but stays in range, which allows Levi to swing underneath and get a connection. So then the way I think about simplifying this gripping strategy from supine is this idea of feet and frames. That's it. If the feet are in place and in front of the opponent, then we can look for grips and look for connections, and especially when the opponent takes pressure off of us but is still in range, that's a good chance to get a connection. But if our feet aren't in place, then we need to use our frames to get our feet back in place. And if we don't frame when they're past the feet, then we're probably going to get past. So here's an example of that with Gabriel Souza and Mikey Musumeci. Gabriel cuts an angle here on the initial pass, relieves the pressure, Mikey doesn't have his feet or his frames in place now, and then Gabriel dives back in and gets the pass. And continuing with that idea, here we're going to see Joseph get past the feet and the knees of Levi, and we'll see it's not a time to be making grips, but rather thinking about retaining as hard as you can and trying to get your feet back in place. One other thing that I find interesting that Levi does is how he deals with north-south passing. So when Cade tries to go north-south here, Levi's going to place his right hand on the mat and use that to drag himself round, so he maintains an angle in front of Cade. And look at the distance that Cade has to stay at now, because he knows that if he comes in range, Levi can switch to an attack. So that range lets Levi sit up, and now he can go back to his seated guard gripping strategies. And this is one last example of his supine gripping strategy in play, and I think it's a good one to analyse because it happens so fast. So Levi's foot is in front of the passer at the moment, so he goes for a throw by and now moves it to the outside. And now Levi's instinctive reaction is to bring his right foot back inside, and you can see how the top player is still in range, which allows Levi to take a scoop grip and swing under for this K-guard entry. So I hope you found that kind of useful. That's two gripping strategies, one from seated and one from supine. In the next part we'll go into the specific attacks he does.